What up, my jiggers? Once again, it's the Lord's Day, and that can only mean that it's time for White Devils. We are the show that translates the bullshit from the Beltway into a language you can understand. And I am your host through this mess we call U.S. politics. Liberal stepper, radical Rich Herman, at your service. As you can see, we are guerrilla shooting on location in my basement because I didn't feel like going to the studio today. Rob's still on sabbatical. I think he's out walking the nether region somewhere. So we're here, we're chilling. A little bit of a down day. Sox got swept by the Yankees. Hurts my heart a little bit, but we'll have better days ahead. Not feeling great. Hope you guys are feeling better. Regardless, though, we still got a few things to get into today. Let me pull up the old list here, see what we're going to be talking about. We have updates on Andrew Brown today, as well as the introduction into the Ronald Green case, which is going to be some fun. Lori Lightfoot, pissing people off. We got to talk about it. And we're going to. The Trumps are back in the news. The Trump organization is under criminal investigation officially. So we're going to dig into that. As always, leave your comments, and we will get to them towards a little bit later on in the show, and we'll go through it, and we're going to converse about all these topics. But I'm going to lead today with the January 6th Commission. I haven't really talked about this a lot yet because I wasn't sure where it was going, and I wanted to see, a lot of times with these issues, I want to see them kind of take shape a little bit before I come out and start saying what I think about it. But here's what we got with the January 6th Commission. So Kevin McCarthy empowered John Katka, which is a Republican in the House, to meet with Benny Williams, who was empowered by Nancy Pelosi, to form a January 6th Commission. Simple enough. The Republicans had a few things on their list of demands. They wanted basically just equal representation, equal subpoena power, and we gave it to them. We gave them, it's a 10-person panel, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats. They both have equal subpoena power, and so we thought it was going to be in good shape. So Katka brought the deal that they had struck back to Kevin McCarthy, and McCarthy poo-pooed it after getting everything he wanted. Why would Kevin McCarthy do that? Well, probably because he would be subpoenaed and he would have to testify against Donald Trump, which would make him look really bad to his base. So the party kind of lined up behind him, or at least the leadership of the party kind of lined up behind him. They voted it through the House, and it did win. It won 232 to 175. I think it's 252 to 175, actually. We got 35 Republicans. So, I mean, is that progress of a sort? I suppose it could be considered that. Still ways to go. Still a lot of Republicans that didn't vote for it in the House. But, you know, there's a mite of progress there. So now the bill for this commission moves over to the Senate, which, how many times do we need to talk about this, guys? Mitch came out and he opposed it. All the crusty old white dudes lined up behind him. They started talking. Actually, Kevin McCarthy, before that, said that it should involve all the other protests and the looting from the summer before. But what do you hope to gain from that? What is it that you need to know about a bunch of pissed off people looting? That people are poor and need to steal stuff? maybe they don't need to steal stuff. That might be an exaggeration. But they're poor enough that they chose to steal some things. I mean, there's no secrets there. Now, you might say the same thing about the January 6th Commission. Well, that was the same deal. There was political influence. There was rumors of people showing some of them around the Capitol building the day before, things like that. You've got the call with McCarthy and Trump. It's worth digging deeper. It's worth getting some people on the books under subpoena power, I believe. But Mitch said no. They're going to take a vote on it next week. Not expecting it to pass. Can't get 10 Republicans. Far be it for me to harp on a Republican. But, they tried to kill you too. They came for your ass. They came for Mike Pence's ass. They really did. They were chanting his name, man. Not in a good way. So it's crazy that they're defending it. But what they're saying is that this will impact the midterms next year. But the report has to be handed in by December 31st of this year. So I don't know about that. But I don't think they're going to get 10 senators. There's hope. There's always hope. Always hope. But it doesn't really seem to be what's popping on the Senate side right now for the Republicans. There are other means that the Democrats could take. There's what do they call it? A select committee or something like that they can put together without needing to pass it through the houses, vote wise. But it's gonna look bipartisan. That's how they're gonna paint it. They're already calling it Pelosi's commission, which is just ridiculous. Dude, they came for everybody's ass that day. So we'll see where that goes, I suppose. We'll have more on it next week after the Senate vote. And we're going to see how the Democrats respond to the Senate vote. And we'll definitely be talking about that here. We have a ceasefire. Last week we talked about Palestine and Israel and how they were lobbing bombs back and forth. Well, finally, after 11 days of that shit, due to pressure from America and Egypt and other countries, there was a ceasefire. Now, the ceasefire, I believe it kicked in Friday. And as far as I know, it's still standing. But almost instantly after the ceasefire, they said that the Israeli police were quelling riots in Palestine, or I'm not even sure where, somewhere in Israel, The footage didn't look like no riots I ever saw. I've seen footage of riots from the U.S., lots, and wherever else over, the course of time. I saw some people standing around, and the police were peppering them with rubber bullets and different gas. It wasn't a good look for Israel, I'm not going to lie. But the truce is held, despite the truce is held. So we're all right there for now. We were kind of talking about it, if you guys tuned in last week, about just trying to educate ourselves more on this situation, because I was the first to admit I didn't know a ton about it. But after discussing it with you guys, and sorry, my nose is itching like a motherfucker, and listening to people talk about it for another week, it's sort of like Hamas is pretty bad. The leader of Palestine has put off an election for 11 years because he's going to lose. Pretty bad. Also, innocent Palestinians, I believe Palestinians, caught in the mix of their games that they're playing. But on the other side, Netanyahu is like Jew Trump. He is. He's Jew Trump. He's got these Israelis doing rallies in Arab neighborhoods, like talking about killing Arabs, chanting, kicking their doors in. He's festering these flames, and he's under indictment. Let's remember that about Benjamin Netanyahu. He's had a trial that they've been delaying for years. At least it feels like it. So he's a pretty shitty dude too, man. And he's steering the country in a different direction. One where it looks like war's on the horizon. And then there's innocent Israelis, behind that. So there's innocents on both sides. Both parties kind of suck, if you ask me. Both heads of government or leadership parties, however you want to break it down. And it's just an ongoing mess. But it's chilled out for now. So we'll leave it be for now. They start lobbing bombs at each other. We'll definitely talk about it here. If you've got any comments, please leave them. And we'll get to them shortly. As this will be probably an abridged version of the show because there ain't a whole lot to talk about. There's only a few things to talk about this week. Not a lot happened. And I'm at home chilling, and I'm just not feeling it. But we're muscling through for you guys. Remember that. What do we got next? Andrew Brown. So, still haven't really seen much of the tape of the Andrew Brown killing. Early this week, District Attorney Andrew Womble came out and said he would not be pressing charges or filing charges on any of the police for anything. So I got to thinking about it, and I had some interesting thoughts, and we will get to those, some of them. But first, I want to play this interview because it really sums up use of force. Okay, I got to play this off my phone, so this is about to be probably awkward looking, and I hope it comes through well. But Seth Stoughton is a professor from USC, and he's a use of force expert. He just testified in the George Floyd trial. So this dude is one of the preeminent dudes on use of force. So we're going to listen to this interview brought to us by Michael Smirkanish, because he's the man. I've told you that before. Get you some Smirkanish. We're going to listen to this interview, and we're going to talk about it afterwards. So hold on.
Yesterday I was driving and listening to a press conference from North Carolina. It was the district attorney, Andrew.
Hey, you can watch me smoke weed while we listen.
Womble, who was announcing that the deputies who fatally shot Andrew Brown Jr. were justified in using deadly force. And as he articulated the deadly force standard, particularly with regard to vehicles, I said to myself, this warrants a drill down on tomorrow's radio program with an authority on police use of force. Well, we have the authority. First, listen to the cut that caught my ear.
The United States Supreme Court, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the North Carolina appellate courts have all held that where officers are attempting to make an arrest, deadly force may be used if it appears to be reasonably necessary to, first, protect against deadly force that the arrestee is using to resist arrest, or two, to take into custody a person who presents an imminent threat of death or serious injury to others unless apprehended immediately.
So did he get it right? And if so, how does it apply to these circumstances? The right person for that task is Seth Stoughton, an associate professor at the University of South Carolina School of Law and an associate professor in the university's Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice. He's written literally the book on the subject. It's called Evaluating Police Use of Forces. Came out in 2020. He's written book chapters on police misconduct. And if the name sounds familiar, it might be because he recently testified as a use of force expert for the prosecution in the trial of Derek Chauvin, who of course was convicted in the killing of George Floyd. Professor Stoughton, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate your appearance.
Thank you for having me.
How did the district attorney do in articulating the deadly force standard that applies?
Well, I think he confused a couple of things. First, I'm not sure why he was talking about the Fourth Amendment or about the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. Both of those are federal constitutional standards, but the district attorney's job is to apply state law, not constitutional law. It's totally different. It's sort of like the rules that apply for your kids at your house as opposed to your parents' house, right? We all know slightly different rules apply. So he is correct in what he described about how the law applies, but the fact that he's relying to some extent on constitutional law doesn't actually make sense in the context that he's supposed to be analyzing this incident in.
Is the test one of, I'll take my shot at it, whether the officer has a reasonable fear of imminent, serious bodily injury?
Yeah, for deadly force, the test is really, would a reasonable officer in that position, so we don't look just at what the individual officer thought, we ask, would a reasonable officer in that position have been afraid of an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm?
And once, let's assume, Professor Stoughton, that the answer to that question is yes. Does that run out that decision-making authority? In other words, in a case like this, where the car pulls away, might the officers have initially been justified, but not be justified when that car no longer poses a risk to them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is yes, absolutely. That authority can exist at one time and then not exist at some future time. It's sometimes said that officers need to account for every bullet that they fire. That is, it's entirely possible for the first shot to be justified and the second or third shot to be not justified, or vice versa. It's possible for the first shot to be unjustified and the second or third shot to be justified. There's an additional component here, though, that the district attorney completely did not discuss at all, and that's the approach of the officers and whether they may have inappropriately or even criminally contributed to creating the situation. So if you look at the video, the snips of video that the district attorney used as he presented his press conference, the officers are approaching this vehicle as it backs away from them, and they maintain a position in front of the vehicle. This is sometimes referred to as officer-created jeopardy. That's when officers unnecessarily and unreasonably put themselves into a dangerous situation and then use force to address the threat that a better tactical approach really should have avoided in the first place.
In other words, they put themselves in harm's way so as to justify, maybe that's not their explicit intent, but they've now, as a practical matter, they've created a need to have to use deadly force.
That's exactly right. Now, to be clear, the district attorney released very limited information about this case. Most of the video is not available. So I can't tell, based on the available information, whether this was really officer-created jeopardy and inappropriate, or whether it was an appropriate tactical approach given the situation. What struck me was that the prosecutor didn't engage with that question really at all. If an officer's reckless actions can create the situation in which they use deadly force, then that's a potential crime. They shouldn't act recklessly in a way that ultimately endangers someone. So when the prosecutor is focusing on just the fact that the car was moving at one point towards officers, it's sort of taking a narrow slice of that case and not looking a little more broadly the way I think is typically appropriate.
I'm glad you referenced the movement of the car. Here's a 30-second clip that I'd like you to analyze. Play it.
Sir, there are several cases. There is a litany of cases in our American jurisprudence where shots are fired into still cars that aren't moving. So the speed at which Mr. Brown is moving at the officers, there is one particular case, it's Robinson versus Arrigetta. In that case, they found that the car was moving 1 to 2 miles an hour at the officers. So the speed at which the car was moving, not relevant in my determination.
Professor Stoughton, your reaction to that is what?
I'm not familiar offhand with the case he mentions, but the idea that the speed of the car is not relevant is ludicrous. Of course, the speed of the car and the positioning of the car are all relevant, because if the car does not present an imminent threat, the way that, for example, a car moving 1 to 2 miles an hour might not present an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm, then there's no justification for shooting. If officers have a safe alternative, like stepping out of the way of a slow-moving car rather than standing in the path of a slow-moving car and shooting at the driver, then I think it's entirely appropriate in that situation, that hypothetical situation, to say that officers should not have shot, that the shooting was not justified based on the easy alternatives available to officers. So I don't understand the conclusion that the speed of the car is irrelevant here.
What if I'm an officer and I've positioned myself at the front of the car, maybe not recklessly, but that car is now headed in my direction? I have a reasonable fear of imminent, serious bodily harm being done to me. I draw my weapon, I fire a shot, and the car pulls away. That car is now 25, 30 yards away from me. It does not pose a risk to me. Am I justified to use deadly force on the theory that the person in that car may now go kill somebody else? It's not going to be me, but maybe it's somebody else.
No, absolutely not. In the same way that an officer can't draw their firearm and shoot someone who's walking past them on the sidewalk on the theory that that person may go on to kill someone else. When we're talking about an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm, the officers have to be able to articulate why that person has the ability to cause the harm, the opportunity to cause the harm, and the apparent intention of causing that particular harm. If someone is shooting at an officer, ability, opportunity, intention are very easy. If someone is driving toward an officer, and leaving aside all issues of an officer being able to step out of the way, if someone is driving towards an officer, ability, opportunity, and intention are relatively easy to articulate. But when the car has passed, the purely speculative assertion that that person may present a danger at some unknown future point to some unknown future persons is not sufficient to justify the application of deadly force.
Does it matter if the person has a long rap sheet that they've been violent in the past, that on a prior occasion they resisted arrest, and I know all this as a member of law enforcement who is there to take him into custody today, so when he peels away, I'm worried he's going to go hurt somebody.
All of those are relevant considerations, but I don't see how they can establish a probable cause that the person presents an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm. Again, we're back to the situation of, if an officer is interacting with someone who has a long rap sheet and they run away, that doesn't give carte blanche to shoot. Officers can use force, and particularly deadly force, when there is an imminent threat, not when there is some speculative possibility of future harm.
Final question. This perception, this reasonable fear of whether they're facing serious harm. Yesterday, the district attorney, it's a short clip, said that these officers perceived a deadly threat. Roll it.
I will tell you this. I will tell you that each one of the deputies that fired their weapons stated that they fired because they perceived a threat to Deputy Lunsford and Deputy Swindell, who was on the other side of the vehicle.
How are we to evaluate that, Professor Stoughton?
So in a criminal prosecution, the potential defendant, here the officer's subjective perceptions do matter. That's part of proving what's technically called the mens rea, the mental component of a crime. But in analyzing a police use of force, we don't really care about subjective perceptions and conclusions. We care about what a reasonable officer on the scene would have perceived and concluded, which may not be the same thing. It's entirely possible for an officer to say, I really was afraid for this other officer's life, and still a reasonable officer in that situation may not have been. So I think there's, again, a little bit of a confusion in the standard, and it seems to me that the prosecutor here is taking a very narrow view of all of the issues that should come into play as we're evaluating a police shooting.
How did your testimony in the Chauvin case change your life?
Well, I got more hate mail than I've ever gotten before. That was interesting.
All right. That's enough of that. I appreciate you guys for hanging through that. Those of you that did. I know it was kind of long and dry, but there's a lot of really valid points that Seth Stoughton makes. So when it comes to Andrew Brown, for those of you that are just tuning in, we're talking about Andrew Brown. We're just listening to an interview about use of force in relation to that case. Basically, the DA, Andrew Womble, just fed us a bunch of bullshit. It was a bunch of stretched, twisted up legal arguments just to get to the conclusion that he wanted to get to, which was he's not charging the cops. So what's my, what do I think? I mean, listen, a car can be a deadly weapon. It can be. Was it in this case? I agree with the professor. Like, speed matters. Direction matters. This dude was good from a dead stop. He was doing like 5 or some shit. And he was trying to get away from the cops. He wasn't trying to plow through the cops. So I'm not really believing that any of this is just use of force. But even if you say, hey, maybe he was trying to hit him with the car, that's how I saw it, okay. The key thing that the professor said, you have to account for every bullet. So you hit him with 3 or 4, and then he's past you. And he's gone now. They hit him with 14 bullets. So that's a lot of bullets you got to account for. I think there's going to be some federal charges on this case. That's my bold prediction. We will see. What do you guys think? Leave a comment. Let me know. So on the heels of these of this Andrew Brown case, a video was leaked to the press, to the media. 49-year-old Ronald Green. He lived in Louisiana. I'm not entirely certain what he was trying to do that night, but police tried to pull him over, and he took him on a chase. And he must have given himself up. No one's really said how the chase ended. But, well, that's not correct. I'm sorry, because they said he died in an accident because he was running from the police. That's what they said. And what we found out when they leaked this tape, whoever leaked this tape, God bless him, because this was 2 years ago, in 2019. They had him cuffed on the ground, face first. Chokeholds were applied. They were punching this dude in the face. They were kicking him. They stunned him. They tased him 6 times. He was begging for his life. And he ended up going into cardiac arrest. And so the cops lied about it. The coroner said it was an accident. Didn't say anything about any, like clearly when someone's been tased and they've been fucking stole off and kicked in the ribs and shit like that. Like they have ways of telling that's what happened. And they didn't say anything. So for 2 years, his family thought he died in a car accident when the police really killed this dude. Of course, the Louisiana state sheriffs or whoever the fuck, they were all pissed off some leaked the video, screwed up our investigation. 2 years, motherfuckers. 2 years. You ain't fucking charged not a goddamn person. These cops came up with blood all over him, and this guy's cuffed the whole time. So it sounds like Merrick Garland's got his hands full between North Carolina and Louisiana, because there's definitely some motherfuckers that need to get indicted. We shall see. What else we got? Oh, yeah, Lori Moe got the Chicago media in an uproar. She said for the second anniversary of her inauguration, she was only going to take interviews from minorities. She pointed out a very white and male press corps. Yeah, and she was she said just for the anniversary, she was only going to do minority interviews. My first reaction was, that's fucking bogus. Stomping on people's rights. I got that whole you did go and right to free media that's biased, blah blah blah. And I heard the media, like some a guy from the Tribune was all offended, and they refused to do an interview. They declined to do an interview because of it, and everyone was all fired up, and I was fired up, and then it kind of hit me like, yo, it's one day. Chill the fuck out, man. But here's the key. Here's the key that really that pivoted my opinion on this deal with Lori Lightfoot, Chicago's mayor, for anybody that doesn't know. Nobody said she was wrong. Nobody has come out and said that she is wrong. Nobody's liked what she did about it, but nobody has argued her point. Okay, so it's one fucking day, man. Calm down. Press get all indignant, man. Shut up, fake news. If you got any comments about it, go ahead and leave them in the comment feed. We get into them in just a second. It's got one more story I want to kind of dig into just a little bit. So, State's Attorney Letitia James, the State's Attorney in New York, came out today and said, State's Attorney or Attorney General, no, there's only one Attorney General, so the State's Attorney of New York, Letitia James, came out and said that the Trump Organization investigation has gone from civil to criminal. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, it's weird that they would come out and announce that publicly. But it sounds like they're in some shit over there, and we'll have to see what happens. I know they've been talking about Alan Weisselberg and getting him to testify. He's the Trump Corporation CFO, their chief financial officer, and they've been putting a lot of pressure on him through, I believe, his son, because his son works there too, and I think they caught him doing some shit, and they're rolling him into Daddy Weisselberg to try to roll him into Trump. And this could get juicy. I haven't talked about this a lot because it's like, there hasn't been a lot of news. And I guess technically there still isn't. But her publicly coming out and stating that they're doing a criminal investigation is a little wild. That definitely means it's real. Because she's the one overseeing it. So that's all I really got for today, guys. Let's dig into some of these comments, see what we got. See what I can read on this fucking thing. Hello, Mike. And Drew says, we're in the mix dealing arms and supplying missiles, defense systems too. This is all really, really bad. It needs to stop. Oh, yeah, we give a lot of aid to Israel. A lot of aid to Israel. We give them like $4 billion, and it's only 9 million people. And dude, if they put 5% of their budget, I seem to say, into R&D, they make like 160 billion a year or something as a country. Or maybe it was their GDP or so. I saw a bunch of shit earlier. It was wild, man. They're like a very successful country, and yeah, we just keep feeding them money, keep feeding them weapons. Okay, hit them ribs. Always hitting them ribs, Mike. We're always hitting the ribs. Jason Hall. On the screen. I'm trying to follow along, but I believe Tulsi Gabbard spoke out against Lightfoot, but she was the only one that I heard. A lot of people, man, like it hasn't been a real like big consensus in the media, but some journalists were really offended by it, I guess. Um, Tucker Carlson called her like a monster and a Nazi. So it's been moving around a little bit the last couple of days. It's gotten some play. I mean, they're of course they're going to use it to shit on the mayor of Chicago. You know, like they're going to weaponize it, whether they really give a fuck about it or not. But again, it was just for one day, man. Like, you know, and if I don't know, I can understand not liking it, but I thought the outrage was a little more than it should have been because it was one day. And people were just looking for something to pile on about because she's not a very popular man. Anywho, that's all I got. I'm going to go scrounge up some dinner. I hope you guys have a good week. Everybody be safe. I'll be back in studio next Sunday. Will Rob be here? I have no idea. Probably. I don't know. We'll just have to see, I guess. Until then, what happened to P?